I want to give a special shout out to all my patrons first. Thank you so much to my Bibliospren, Bibliohowlers, and my Bibliomancers. It means a lot to me that you give me your extra support for my passion and hobby. Hi everyone, Petrik here. Because I am currently making my way through the Wheel of Time series, and I know this will take me years to actually finish, but I have decided to do, well, a spoiler-free book review for each book I finish in the Wheel of Time series ever since the Fires of Heaven. And today, because I have finally finished reading the 8th novel in the Wheel of Time series, I will be talking about the Path of Daggers. And this was a bit surprising. The 8th volume and the second infamous Slog novel of the Wheel of Time series, Path of Daggers, was not as bad as A Crown of Swords. Without going into too many details of the previous book, well, A Crown of Swords was a huge downgrade for the series for me. I went into that book prepared for the beginning of the Slog, and even then, I was still shocked by how significant the downgrade was from Lord of Chaos, my favorite book in the series so far. Compared to that, with repeated tempered expectations, I went into the Path of Daggers after a 5 months break. And hey, Path of Daggers was surprisingly good enough. I will even go far enough to say there were some scenes here that were straight up incredible. But this isn't to say all the issues from the previous book have disappeared. I do have mixed feelings regarding the Path of Daggers. The reality is not that pleasant, but there were several factors like Path of Daggers being the smallest without counting A New Spring, the prequel novel, of the series. I end up finishing Path of Daggers faster than I expected. 18 days. A Crown of Swords took me 35 days to finish, the longest I ever spent on reading a single book. I am thankful that relatively slow reading time is not replicated here. And for this review, I will share my thoughts regarding Path of Daggers by sharing my opinion on each main character's POV storyline. Elaine dominated the first quarter of Path of Daggers. Come to think about it, I am pretty sure she statistically has the most POV chapters in this book. And the first half of this book is where I struggled the most. Your miles may vary, but I could not bring myself to like Elaine. Not yet. In comparison, Nynaeve is one of the most thick-headed and infuriating characters I have ever read. But even then, I can still assess it as a distinct part of her character. But for Elaine, there hasn't been anything about her personality that felt likable or distinct to me. It is so weird to me that she constantly blamed and ridiculed Nynaeve's and Lance's relationship, and yet there were moments in the Fires of Heaven where she wanted Tom Marilyn for herself. I don't think she has the right to judge Nynaeve for her genuine feelings for Lan. But besides that, the majority of her POV chapters are filled with the weakness of the series, and that is the lack of distinct female characters. There were so many inconsequential names and female characters, and once again, all they did was bicker and mock each other all the time. Like always, it is a pattern of the series. That said, I must admit, the battle that transpired in Elaine's POV chapter at the end of the first quarter of Path of Daggers was quite tense. If the first quarter of Path of Daggers was full of Elaine's POV chapters, why did I say the first half was difficult and boring? Well, because after Elaine, we have to read Perrin's portion. We are 8 books into the series now, and I genuinely have no idea whether I will ever get to like Perrin as a character. Certainly not yet, maybe ever. We will see how it goes by the time I reach the end of the series. His relationship with Fail is a massive failure and pain to read. And he ceaselessly and immediately cowers or follows everything that Fail says. This transformed Perrin into a weaker character than he already was spiritually. His mentor even told him that he needs to stand up for himself here. It has been 8 books long. And although it is possible there is a rewarding character development waiting behind all of this, I have a feeling this is not going away anytime soon. Out of the Tavern, Perrin is the one that feels less developed. His character's development has been relatively stagnant since The Shadow Rising. His storyline with the Prophet did not turn into something interesting until his last 2 POV chapters in Path of Daggers. I remember The Fires of Heaven sparked my interest to continue reading the series again, and I must say, one of the reasons why that book works so well for me is because it contains no parent's appearance. As I said, Path of Daggers was a mixed baggage for me, and although I have been mostly negative about my thoughts regarding the Path of Daggers so far, Egwene somehow became the biggest pleasant surprise for me in this novel. Some of the issues I mentioned in Elaine's POV chapters, such as the incomprehensible Aes Sedai politics, are evident. I do not know whether any of you experienced this or not, but I was reading this book together with my co-bloggers and they agree with me. Sometimes when reading Robert Jordan's prose, the writing style can make English feels like reading a new language. It's not even because the words are difficult. I read the words, I know what they meant, but somehow they just weren't registered in my head. And this happened a lot in The Crown of Swords and Path of Daggers, mainly in Elaine and Egwene's POV chapters. But thankfully, in the case of Egwene's POV chapters, they are balanced with great moments. Egwene pulled off an impactful move in Path of Daggers, and it highly raised her rank in my list of likable Wheel of Time characters. After everything that happened, I am curious to see where her story will lead. Although I still think her character development proceeded relatively quickly because the events in this book are done in a matter of weeks, I still found her character development satisfying. Lastly, as expected, Rahn daltor's POV chapters are my favorites. It was starting to test my patience that we got 2 chapters of Rahn in chapter 13 and 14, and then after that, none of him until the last 35% of Path of Daggers. So yes, patience is needed if you are a fan of Rahn and Matt like I am. Even more so if you are a fan of Matt, because he did not appear at all in the Path of Daggers. Not even once. It was unfortunate because I have no doubt his presence would have made this book more engaging. But anyway, back to Rahn. Unlike many of the characters in the Wheel of Time, with the exception of the 3 wives plotline, I am fully invested in Rahn's storyline. His constant internal struggle with Lews Therin never felt uninteresting. And in the battles against Shen Chan in Path of Daggers, we get to witness the blazing power of the dragon reborn. Lightning, flame, destruction, and death were conjured. The prophecies of the dragon demanded blood, and he fulfilled it. The dead bodies accumulated will stamp his name in history, for better or worse. And there is also the matter of Aes Sedai and Ashaman that Rahn has to juggle. I loved it, and I wish we had more of Rahn's story here. Rahn daltor and Matrim Cotton and Sanderson finishing the last 3 books are the strongest motivators for me to conquer the slog of the Wheel of Time. There aren't too many things left to say. I know this is the smallest book in the series, but it still felt bloated, and somehow there was minimal plot progression and character development. However, as far as the slog of the Wheel of Time was supposed to go, the Path of Daggers was not as underwhelming as I expected. There were some pivotal and epic moments that were crucial to the narrative of the series. And even though it is true the magnificent and epic moments needed patience and perseverance to reach, the overall experience of reading Path of Daggers did not make me want to give up like it did in A Crown of Swords. I cannot believe I'm more than halfway through the series now, and that means I still have 2 more Slog novels of the series to go before the series allegedly return to being great again. It is very likely I will read book number 9 in the series, Winter's Heart, in December or January. But until then, the wheel weaves as the wheel wills. So yeah, that's really my thoughts regarding the Path of Daggers, book number 8 in the series. Before starting the Path of Daggers, I remember people telling me they either really like this one more than A Crown of Swords or dislike this one even worse than A Crown of Swords. So do let me know what you think about this book if you have read it. And if you haven't read The Path of Daggers yet, let me know whether you plan to read The Wheel of Time to its completion or not. As always, thank you so much for watching and thank you for your support. Bye bye. Lastly, I want to say thank you so much once again to all my patrons who keep on supporting me.